The sixth sense is something that has always belonged to us, but it was never explained to us at school or by our parents, and so it seems unfamiliar. In truth, we have always known we had it within us, even if we have called it by different names. Whether we call it a feeling, perception, sensitivity, foresight, or any other familiar term, we all know there is a sensory inside us that sometimes warns us of an event or makes us feel strange, to alert us that something is wrong. Surely it's not something you could easily describe in words, because in fact no one has ever explained it to you before. And yet, deep inside, you know that when you perceive that specific sensation, it can mean only one thing. Everyone might perceive it differently, because some may feel a sensation in their chest, while others see a sort of flash in their mind. But the point is that, when it happens, you know it's not a mistake. You know it's not imagination. It's something warning you about a situation that is happening or about to happen. You can call it whatever you like, but this is the sixth sense. Some people become aware of it from a young age, perhaps because they have had premonitory dreams or were able to sense what someone was going to say, way before they said it. Others realize it during adolescence, and others come to understand it in adulthood. It doesn't matter when you become aware of it, because the sixth sense has always belonged to you. You know when people talk about clairvoyance or premonition, the ability to know something that is about to happen or will happen in the distant future well before it does, or the ability to sense what others are about to say before they say it, a kind of telepathy, or that ability to tell if someone is lying to you or hiding something, even if you have only chatted with them online and have no way of seeing their face or observing their movements. These are just glimpses of the sixth sense. Today, we see the world divided into two parts. On one side, there are those who do not believe in the sixth sense and its various branches. On the other side, we find those who say they have always had a developed sixth sense. But neither side is aware of how incredibly evolved the sixth sense truly is, and how it does not stop at a premonitory dream or a strange sensation that warns you at night. The sixth sense has always belonged to us, as it is a part of our consciousness, and it is a sense that is born with us. Like all other senses, it does not appear as abnormal in our lives, but is so normal that we don't realize we have it. Thus, we believe that the only people who possess the sixth sense are those who experience more intense events, such as those who have dreams that come true shortly after with high accuracy, or those who sense the presence of entities. At that point, if we have never had a premonitory dream or seen an entity, we believe that the sixth sense is not something that belongs to us or that interests us. In truth, the sixth sense is not just that, but the combination of all sensory abilities united. Just because some people grow up with a slightly more active sensory perception, it is though that they have the sixth sense, while everyone else does not. The truth is much more complex, but also positive. Who knows how many times in your life you have shown signs of possessing the sixth sense, but you didn't notice it at all, since it belongs to you and it's completely normal to use it. For example, your most visible ability might be the instinctive perception of whether someone you've just met is a good person or could potentially harm you. It's not about appearance, but experience. In fact, you're not judging the person's looks, but you feel deep inside that this person, despite being attractive and friendly with everyone, is hiding something that would bring serious trouble if you let them into your life. You know this because every time you felt that sensation, you were right, and the experience of multiple similar situations has taught you to immediately understand when that feeling is true and should be listened to right away, or when it's just a fleeting impression. This is a glimpse of the sixth sense. Or you might have an entirely different ability. In fact, you may have often misjudged people, letting the wrong ones into your life without realizing it until they caused you serious trouble. This might lead you to believe you don't have even a shred of sixth sense, and in that area it may be true. However, you could have a natural ability to perceive events in a completely different domain. For example, you might already know that when you go to a specific place, say a cafe, you'll run into someone, even though you hadn't planned to meet and there was no reason for either of you to be there. Yet, in your mind, you calmly sense that you'll see that specific person today, and when it happens, it all feels perfectly normal. No one had told you that person would be there. And besides, that's not a place they usually go to yet. You already knew you would find them right there. How many times have you thought about someone you hadn't seen in a long time, and suddenly you run into them while walking or doing your shopping? How many times have you thought about calling someone you don't usually talk to, and just as you pick up the phone, it starts ringing because that very person has decided to call you at that exact moment? You can call these coincidences all your life, or you can realize that the sixth sense exists. The sixth sense is an organ of your consciousness, so everyone possesses it, but not everyone discovers it in the same way. In fact, it can present itself differently to each of us, but the sixth sense is so normal that there isn't a switch to turn it on or off, and it doesn't warn you when it's about to offer you a vision or a perception. It just does, just like your ears don't warn you when they are about to hear something. They simply hear. The sixth sense can sometimes appear more pronounced, for example, in the case of premonitory dreams, leading a person to suspect they possess an additional sense beyond the 5 common senses studied at school. In fact, as long as you predict something, someone at a bar or another place, you don't get frightened by your premonition. On the contrary, you ignore what just happened and pretend it's nothing. You deny it to yourself. However, when something more pronounced happens to you, like having a premonitory dream with great detail, and the same exact situation plays out in reality that very day or the next, it puts you on higher alert, because predicting the future can be frightening for many. Indeed, there are sixth sense abilities that are more pronounced or evident than others, and this leads people to believe that some individuals possess the sixth sense while others do not. In truth, everyone possesses it, even skeptics, but some become aware of it while others, out of fear of the unknown, prefer to deny the evidence and convince themselves that it's all just a massive chain of coincidences and collective delusion. Of course, because predicting someone else's car accident or seeing at a distance with absolute certainty where another person is and what they are doing at that very moment, confirmed by them, is all just illusion, a fantasy. After all, the other person also confirmed everything because they are imagining it too. Let's be honest. When we want to deny the evidence, we are capable of coming up with anything, even excuses more absurd than the sensory ability themselves. So you can pretend it's all fantasy, or you can realize that the sixth sense is the most natural thing in the world because it has always belonged to you, just like every organ of your body. Every single extrasensory ability is part of the sixth sense. When we talk about telepathy, premonition, or remote viewing, we are describing individual abilities that all lead back to the same sixth sense. We can compare the sixth sense to hearing. There are those who are very skilled at recognizing every sound they hear and identifying it as a musical note, and others who just hear a mass of sounds as if it were a loud noise. But the truth is that both are using their hearing to listen. It's just that the first one has trained themselves to recognize the sounds, while the other hears without understanding what they are listening to, and thus is almost annoyed by it. Whether you're hearing the chirping of birds or the sound of a bus passing in front of your house, you're using your hearing to perceive both sounds, even though they are very different from one another. The sixth sense works in a similar way. Whether you foresee meeting someone or you sense the sentence they are about to say, in both cases, you are using the sixth sense. Using the example of hearing, not all of us have a musical ear capable of identifying the musical notes in every song. But does this mean we all lack hearing? Of course not. It only depends on training. A musician trains to learn how to recognize notes, while everyone else, those who aren't musicians, do not train in that way. That's why the vast majority are unable to catch all the nuances of music or distinguish one musical instrument from another, and instead hear only a single overall melody. The sixth sense is the same. If untrained, it remains very weak and incapable of recognizing what is happening around you. But if it is trained, just like a musical ear, you begin to notice things that others don't see, hear, or sense, giving you a significant advantage to live your life more fully. Surely, having a musical ear doesn't matter to someone who doesn't intend to become a musician. Yet, hearing still matters, even if you don't listen to music. Just like hearing or sight, the sixth sense also has multiple levels of ability. Even vision differs not only in terms of how many diopters you have, but also in your capacity for observation. For example, you might be someone who wears glasses because of poor eyesight, and yet, once you put them on, as you walk down the street or head somewhere, you notice a great many details around you. You might immediately spot whether there's a friend or a colleague among the crowd passing by. Or you might be one of those people who have 20/20 hindsight, in other words, perfect eyesight. Yet, when walking down the street, you don't even notice someone just a meter away who stops to look at you and say hello. You seem blinder than someone who is actually blind. That's because seeing is not just about vision acuity, but also about your ability to be aware of your surroundings, rather than walking around as if your eyes were covered. Just like with the sixth sense, you might have perfect vision, the highest degree possible, and yet still fail to notice anything around you, to the point where someone with very poor eyesight sees better than you do. That's why everyone possesses the sixth sense, but far fewer people seem to actually use it. Therefore, the real question we should be asking is not why some people have the sixth sense and others don't, but rather why some people become aware of it from a young age, while others don't realize it even in adulthood. The first reason lies in habits above all, the environment in which you grew up and the routines you have had or were forced to have. Let's look at some simple examples. A child raised in a house haunted by entities is more likely to grow up with the ability to perceive those presences or even see them than someone who was born and raised in a home where no so-called paranormal events ever occurred. Even though we all possess that ability within us, some have trained it since childhood, either by choice or due to certain circumstances, while others have not. That's why there are adults capable of sensing or even seeing entities, and others who are not. Another example is a child raised in a very peaceful environment, pampered and surrounded by a loving family, within a stable context which led the child to never need to be on the defensive. As a result, they grew up in their comfort zone, and even while well into their youth, they may not have noticed having any sensory abilities, simply because everything they needed was already there. A child raised in a slightly more complex situation, which is not necessarily in a violent family environment, but even just in a tougher context, whether the hardship comes from within, family issues, or from the outside, trouble at school, bullying, etc., is more likely to be inclined to seek a solution to their problems, even unconsciously, to the point of activating something within their subconscious that opens them up to one or more faculties to the sixth sense. For example, over time, the child may have learned to foresee where problems would arise, like already knowing that if they turn down a certain street, they'll run into bullies who would harass them, and so they instinctively choose a different route. Or they might begin to dream the future, discovering in advance what will happen the next day, allowing them to avoid making a mistake that would lead to embarrassment in front of classmates, or to dodge a surprise test at school. These are small signs where we think about them now, but when you are in those situations, they are sensories of great help because they help you avoid problems that can feel very serious at that age. So, discovering the existence of the sixth sense, whether at a younger or older age, greatly depends on the habits and the context in which each of us grew up. However, the biggest mistake one can make is the belief that if the sixth sense isn't developed from childhood, it will never develop, as if there were a chance that by becoming an adult you might lose that mental organ. The truth is that the sixth sense will accompany you until your last day of life, because it belongs to your consciousness, and you cannot lose it for any reason. Certainly, you could enhance its abilities by paying more attention to it, or diminish its abilities by continuously ignoring it. But it is something that has always belonged to you. The only difference we might consider a great advantage is that if we grow up from childhood with the awareness of possessing the sixth sense, it would be easier, also as adults, to approach its various faculties, because you realize that it's all natural. It's a muscle that needs to be trained. On the other hand, starting as an adult can be scarier because you are not used to its abilities, such as predicting the future or perceiving what someone is about to say before they say it. So, all of this can frighten you. Fear is a major block that can prevent you from embarking on an evolutionary path, even if deep inside you know that the sixth sense is the most natural thing in the world. But it happens that, as adults, we are more afraid, and so we greatly limit our sixth sense. There is no difference or impossibility for an adult to develop their sixth sense, even if they didn't start as a child. It's just a fear, and you will start realizing that you have nothing to fear from something that has always belonged to you. In fact, let's be honest. What are you expecting? If you didn't start as a child, so what? Do you really want to believe that you can't do anything for your present and your future just because you didn't start when you were little? Therefore, it is truly important that you understand that the sixth sense is like a muscle which can be developed even if you only start training it as an adult. It hasn't died in the meantime. Furthermore, it's essential to know that the sixth sense is the combination of many sensory abilities and not just the synonym for a single faculty. In fact, many people speak about themselves as if they have had their entire sixth sense developed since childhood. This is because, understandably, without really knowing what the sixth sense actually is, they don't even realize that they haven't fully developed it. They only have a taste of a specific ability. Try to think for a moment about the ability to see auras or remote viewing or precognition or telepathy. These are all faculties that belong to the sixth sense, and yet each one is very different from the others listed. In fact, for those who are not familiar with the vast abilities of the sixth sense, it might seem as though all these faculties are separate from one another, as if they were entirely different senses. Instead, all of them are part of the same group, and therefore part of the same muscle, called the sixth sense. So, if we want to be precise, saying that we have had our sixth sense developed since childhood is incorrect, because you do not possess all these faculties evolved to the same level. What's more likely is that you have had significant glimpses of certain abilities, such as precognition, but the others you still don't know yet. For example, you might have had many experiences of precognition and yet have never seen an aura in your entire life before encountering this academy. This does not mean that you possess only one single ability of the sixth sense. You possess them all. It's just that, throughout your life, you have only had glimpses of one or a few of them. Because the context and the habits you have lived through have led you to experience only those, and you haven't taken an interest in discovering all the others as well. the sixth sense is much more than that. In fact, you can choose to evolve the abilities you already know to much higher levels, so that you gain complete mastery over your favorite faculty. You can discover the existence of many other abilities that you didn't know before. At the moment, it's normal to believe that you want to develop only your favorite faculty, because it's the only one you know, and therefore it's naturally your favorite. But if you could open your mind and choose to even just try to understand the usefulness of all the other existing faculties, you surely wouldn't stay stuck in your comfort zone anymore, but you would decide to experiment with the others as well. Your sixth sense has all abilities, even those you have never heard of before. Therefore, it would truly be a shame if you didn't use it to its full potential. Through this journey, I will guide you to discover all the faculties that belong to your sixth sense, so that you can realize the vastness of what you could achieve if you choose to do so. Afterwards, I will teach you the techniques to develop each of these faculties to increasingly higher and lesser known levels among most people. You will be the one to decide when and if you truly want to stop, because once you begin to understand the value of what you hold inside your mind, in my opinion, you will never want to stop exploring it more deeply. No matter what level you are at or what level you think you are at, I assure you that this is only the beginning of your true evolutionary journey.